Today I want to talk about one of my favorite gardening tasks for fall, and that is dividing up my perennials. Now, if you follow my channel for any amount of time, you would know that I absolutely love gardening on a budget, saving money anywhere I can, and that of course includes dividing my perennials so I can spread them around to different parts of my landscape and expand the landscape, all while sticking to that budget. Getting free plants out of dividing your perennials is a fabulous reason to do it, but I have so many more to show you and examples of what the best perennials to divide in fall are.
Hi you guys, this is Nicole from My Carolina Garden. My garden is located in growing zone 8B and we are in southeastern North Carolina.
The first perennial I want to suggest that you divide up in the fall is the hosta. Now the hostas are a shade-loving, low-growing, clump-forming perennial plant. They are what I would consider to be aggressive growers. If they have the right growing conditions, you are going to see these things just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Like when they start coming out with their little tiny shoots in the spring, you might be thinking, it's fine, I didn't need to divide that perennial up. And then all of a sudden they look like this and you're like, dang, I really could have divided that up. So dividing a hosta is good for it or other aggressive growing perennials because they need the space to spread out. They are going to be healthier if they get that extra space. Here's how you divide up a hosta. If you choose to divide up your hostas in the fall, once the leaves begin to turn yellow, you can dig up the entire clump. The root system is going to be large, but you can take a sharp knife or a sharp spade shovel and just basically divide that root system into, I say, like pie slices. I usually like to divide a plant that's this big into 4. You can then take those clumps and plant them into the ground at the same depth that you just took this plant from and water it in well. Now don't forget, you are not going to see new growth emerge from your hosta divisions for the fall time. So if everything looks like it's dying back, those leaves are yellowing even more, turning brown, falling off, that is expected because hostas go into a dormancy period and then you'll see the fresh growth on them in the spring. Daylilies, which is this clump of green that you see kind of hidden right now back here. Daylilies actually perform best when you divide them up every 3 to 5 years. That is another reason why dividing perennials is important, because you can get them to bloom best after dividing. And daylilies are super duper easy because, again, the root system is not tremendously deep, so you're not going to have a very hard time digging up this clump, even one that's large. Start from the edge, begin digging in from that edge, and just scoop up a nice big clump of daylily. You can then cut the foliage back to about 6 inches in height, divide up the root system whatever way you see fit. I don't feel it's as cut and dried as a hosta dividing into pie pieces, simply because that's not the roots are not as clumped or tightly held as the hosta. But take a sharp knife or your sharp spade shovel, divide up the roots and replant. And just like the hostas, you are not going to see any new green growth emerge from these new plantings in the fall. You will just see the new growth start again in the early spring. The Baju hardy banana. If you grow these hardy banana trees, fall is a fabulous time to divide the pups up from the main plant. So it's different than dividing the other 2 perennials we've already talked about, in that these pups actually start boop, 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 popping up all around the main base trunks of the parent tree. So you can actually remove this pup by digging gently around this area, making sure that you dig up some roots with the pup. And then you can go ahead and move it to its new location. Now this one may act a little bit differently because you may actually see brand new shoots emerging from the center of the pup as long as frost time hasn't hit yet. These guys are really interesting because even in the very, very early spring, when a warm day comes out, you may see a little bloop of an elephant leaf, of a banana tree leaf come out. just for it to get too cold that night or the next day, and then it dies back again. But the nature of this guy is, if you have some beautiful days, you're going to see some new leaf growth. But the idea here is to get the roots of the pups established now, again, before the major heat and the stress of the following year. Now, we have already said that controlling the size and the spread of an aggressive spreading plant would be one of the reasons to divide. Well, the canna lily definitely fits in that aggressive spreading category. However, controlling its spread is not the only reason to divide. Another reason you would divide is because you want to help prevent disease and pests from attacking your plant. Now, because canna lilies clump so much, they get real tight together. We have lots of huge foliage pieces, and then the air circulation around this plant suffers. Because of that, you can see things like rust damage on my canna lilies. This year in particular was terrible weather-wise. Severe heat and humidity that just lasted for days. We had lack of air circulation, lack of rain. Things just went wild, and my canna lilies really suffered. So these major spots that you see on my canna lily foliage are those rust spots that have just kind of taken over and ruined a lot of the foliage pieces, except for fresh new growth that you'll see coming up that of course doesn't have that yet. So I need to very aggressively get in here and divide up my canna lilies. The way that you divide a canna lily is not entirely different from what we've already talked about, because you are in there to get clumps of the roots out. However, canna lilies have a rhizome root. So that's the kind that looks more like a ginger root, if you will. That's something that you might be familiar with visually. It's a hard packed, almost like a potato kind of root that you can break up in different pieces. It doesn't have to be like a whole potato going out, for example, or a whole ginger root coming out, but you can break up those roots and then replant those into the ground. Now, here in my zone 8B garden, canna lilies are perennial, so they'll come back for me with no problem. Some people may need to take those rhizome roots indoors for the winter, but that's not what I have to do here. Regardless, dividing up my canna lilies is huge for me. First of all, they're great as lovely tropical plants in my garden, which is a style I like. I get to spread them around to different areas of my garden, but I also get to garden share with them. So if I'm in the plant trading mood with my friends, I have lots of canna lilies I can offer up and give those away. So far, the reasons we've talked about for wanting to divide our perennials are free plants that we can use in other areas or give them away, controlling the size and spread of plants, encouraging more blooms, because if they're too tightly packed, they may not bloom as well, like we talked about with the daylilies, preventing disease and pest issues, like seeing the rust spots when there's not enough air circulation around the canna lilies. Something we didn't delve into just yet, but would make sense for all of these so far, is it's a better use of resources to divide up those perennials. If the tightly packed roots are competing for water and nutrients, then dividing them is going to be gives them a better chance to be able to suck up those nutrients and suck up that water that it needs to thrive. Landscape flexibility is another great thing to think about, because not only are these plants free for you, but you can think about ways to design your landscape based on plants that you already own. So you know how they perform for you, you know how tall they get, what kind of light they like to receive. So it's a benefit because you're already growing these things. There's another reason to divide up perennials, and we're going to talk about that while we talk about another perennial to divide up. Many perennials can actually get woody or thin or begin to die back in their centers if they are not divided up to promote healthier growth. Now, I have coneflowers, echinacea, that are back here in my rock garden that sit in a huge clump. They looked fabulous in the spring, but again, due to our absolutely disgusting summer, which was very, very difficult on my garden, I got powdery mildew on my coneflowers. So no need to get up close and personal to see those specifically. I will cut those back. That's what has to happen, and I will have to discard the stems and foliage because they're not healthy and I don't want to have a diseased plant next year. However, dividing up your coneflowers like your echinacea, like your black-eyed Susans, those are also going to allow you to share the joy, share the wealth, share the color in other areas of your garden, and hopefully keep those babies feeling fresh. Another perennial we want to talk about dividing up are our ornamental grasses. Now in this case right here I have zebra grass, but this works with other kinds of clumping grasses as well. You can actually get right in there as long as your tool is sharp enough, because these guys can be massive and have massively thick root systems, and divide up those clumps with your sharp tool. Now these grasses are an example of ones that are extremely tall, but there are other smaller, lower growing grasses like this lirio or liriope, or however you want to pronounce it, that I have in the front of my flower bed. Now I have divided these already in the past, which is why they're still pretty small. They are also clumpers, so they will get bigger over time. Now in this case, I want these grasses to become even bigger than they are, and since they've been divided previously, I'm leaving them here as they sit. But other kinds of decorative grasses can also thrive from being divided up, and you may benefit as well, again, as you can do brand new things in your landscape with them. Now this huge clump of green are all daylilies also, just like in my backyard, but this one isn't quite as hidden. I absolutely will divide this up because it is an aggressive spreader. I don't need it to be taking over this entire area, and I want this to have as many blooms as possible, because if I'm going to have all this green foliage, I may as well have the flowers that go with it, right? So this area will change as I dig out a lot of these orange daylilies that are up here in the front. Irises are yet another plant that benefits from being divided up. Now this also may affect the amount of blooms you get, so if you don't get a lot of blooms on your irises, maybe it is time for you to divide up. Now you can tell your iris foliage because of how unique it is, very flat, kind of pointy at the top, not too spiky though. And you can actually dig up these rhizome roots, same kind of rhizome or same kind of root system as our canna lilies, and divide them up. You can cut them with something sharp, so you're getting a piece of that ginger looking root or rhizome root, and as long as you have one fan on it, you should be a-okay. Plant these guys right below the soil level. You can cut your foliage down to about 6 inches. Some people suggest you cut your iris foliage at a diagonal, and then boom, wait for next year's growth, because once again, you are not going to be seeing anything in the fall or winter time with these guys. So I am a huge fan of dividing up my own perennials, and a lot of it is because of the benefit in your pocketbook, that you don't have to spend a lot of money rebuying the same things over and over again. But also, of course, we want our gardens to be healthy, and so if it's going to benefit my plants or flowers to keep them divided up, well, it's just another fabulous reason for me to do so. Hopefully you found this video to be helpful, because this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I could talk all day about dividing up plants and making more of the things that we love. Subscribe if you haven't already. Definitely follow me on social media, and until next time, you guys, happy planting.